Hey, it's Trevor Grant from Revenue Hub. In today's video, we're joined by Michael Bennett, Chief Marketing Officer at Cendyn. Michael talks broadly about what marketing and communication approaches he is seeing in different hotel groups and regions as they face the challenge of opening. We then talk a little more specifically about the importance of a CRM in these times to ensure your messaging is really targeted to your different personas. We also touch on the increased relevance of a CRM as hoteliers prepare for a cookie-free world in 2023. Naturally, any links we reference in this discussion, we will put in the description below. And if you are new to the channel, if you wouldn't mind hitting the subscribe button, that would be great. Anyway, hope you enjoy it. Roll the intro. So welcome to another Revenue Hub webcast. Today we are joined by Michael Bennett, who's Chief Marketing Officer for Cendyn. You wouldn't mind just giving us a brief introduction about yourself and Cendyn?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So as you mentioned, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Cendyn. I've been at Cendyn about 4 years now. We're a global company headquartered out of Florida, but offices around the globe. And we service solely the hotel space within the hospitality vertical. So we got software solutions that cover sales, which is really group sales focused, marketing, inclusive of CRM and digital, and then revenue management solutions with our recent addition with the Rainmaker acquisition last year. So I've been in and around hospitality for my entire career, which is longer than I care to admit, but 20 some odd years now. And like I said, last 4 years here with Cendyn. So.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you. Now, when we had an initial conversation and taking into account that was probably about a week or so ago and things change rapidly, one of the areas we were looking at, I mean, there seems to be two general paths that people are taking from a digital marketing guest communication point of view. Some are saying there's absolutely no point in doing it. Others are saying you should still keep doing it. That message may have slightly changed as more data is coming in to show there may be a light at the end of the tunnel. Just as a general broad comment on what you are seeing at the moment and how maybe the trends and data, what it's indicating from a broad marketing point of view, I would guess you would be in favor of saying, yeah, there's got to be some sort of communication going on one way or another. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think you can put it in two buckets. Generally, communication, yes. So, I mean, if you have a CRM platform or ability to communicate with your guests or via loyalty platform, whatever it might be, yes, I think you should be communicating to your guests in some way, shape, or form about what your intentions are. If your property's closed, when you anticipate reopening, if you're open, what you're open to, what's open within the properties.
Yeah, good point.
How are you going to, if you're a group house, if you have a significant amount of group business, chances are you're communicating with the groups that have canceled. How do you restore that business forward looking? How does it come back? So from a communication standpoint, I think the short answer is yes, you should be communicating. It should not be you shouldn't be sending emails that say, like, hey, come and stay with us right now. It shouldn't be transactional in nature, right? It should be very thoughtful in the approach. And if you're doing things for the local community, whether you're cooking, providing rooms, whatever it is, any sort of support like that, it's a great opportunity to show your guests, in particular if you have a loyalty program, your loyal guests, how you're helping. I think that goes a long way. The other bucket being the spending media dollars piece. Again, if you look at the last major thing we went through was the 08-09 financial crisis, and Cornell did a nice study on this. I don't know, it was a few years later, I want to say 13, 14, and they looked at it. They saw that those that did at least keep a trickle of marketing going in some way, shape, or form, it could just be brand awareness, brand play around PPC, et cetera, but just a little bit going, and then were aggressive as they saw we saw things start to come out. They got more aggressive. Those that had a trickle and were quicker to respond, had a much higher success of maintaining rate and demand versus those that didn't have to go through a fire sale mode to try and put heads in beds. So
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And one of the things we were talking about when we first discussed this was the complexity around. We almost had numerous different layers to this, and we touched on this as well when we did the interview recently with Dan Skodel, in terms of from a revenue management point of view and looking from a bookings perspective. And you brought up the kind of the concept, but the terminology about looking the differentiation between hyperlocal, local, regional, national, international, and how now there are these very different layers and segments. And so this more granular approach and how your digital standpoint spreads out across those different layers is important to take into account. Can you kind of expand and give some insights into that a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah, I think, obviously the days, as much as I would like it as an avid traveler, me just hopping on a plane and flying to London on holidays, it's become an extremely complex, finding a flight that I could take is part of the problem, mandated quarantines, all that. It's going to be a long time before we can easily travel international again. So that's going to require us to start very sort of hyper local. We're hearing and seeing the data that says that in terms of summer holiday here in the States, and we're starting to hear it even from overseas, that people are going to get in a car and drive. So how do you talk to them? And again, I'm in California. It's a big state. There's 10 hours drive one end to the other. Wow. There's a hyper local opportunity just there, right? So, and it's not only the sort of the geo fence you put on your marketing dollars, but the messaging as well, right? Can you, think about the days of if you want a family to come stay at your resort, the last thing parents want to see today is an ad with a pool that's crowded with people. Yeah, there's a social distancing. So just not only the written message, but your photography and your positioning has to change as well. You don't want to see a restaurant full of people, bustling people, or a nightclub that automatically triggers that sense of, I need my 6 feet, or whatever your social distancing safe area is individually. So there's a how do I track my people local, a little bit more regional, then at a national level as national, as airlines start to fly regionally and nationally again, in terms of adding capacity and route. And then eventually, then you have an international playback. And hopefully at that point in time, we're in a lot better place than we are today. But it's going to be phased for sure. For sure, it can be phased.
Yeah. And I guess a bit, when you guys talk regional within the US, the distances you're traveling are longer than they are if we're traveling for UK into parts of Europe, for instance. So
sure. Yeah.
The restrictions that exist around the airlines, the discussions around the airlines and the flights, and there seems to be a view that they're going to come back later than the broader hospitality in terms of leisure, restaurants and hotel section would do. So contemplating what you would consider as regional in the US and what we would consider as international or regional within Europe, that market almost seems dead for months still, unless something dramatically changes. Is that the same feeling you're getting over there?
Yeah, I think there's an eagerness to travel. I think you're seeing bubbles. There's the talks of the bubble in between New Zealand and Australia, where they're kind of saying, hey, we're going to open up here to this bubble first, and then we'll expand the bubble accordingly into Southeast Asia, et cetera. I would expect you probably see something like that. U.S. is kind of that already, but in mainland Europe, potentially you might see something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, air travel having an impact on inbound tourism into places, big markets that depend on it, like Las Vegas, for example, Orlando, Southern California, where I'm at. You're gonna be rely on drive market for at least, I think, the summer period, maybe late summer, early fall. As we get into Q3, potentially you start to feel some impact, but it's going to take these big destination areas a better part of a quarter to figure out how to operate under a new normal. Just look at the Disneyland in Shanghai opened this past week or yesterday, I believe.
Yeah.
Just reading the operational things they've had to change to just accommodate 30-40% of normally what they would on a given day previously is astounding. So to think about and we know from our casino clients in Las Vegas, the operational challenges of rethinking how they open under a new normal. So yeah, I think we're better part of Q3 before we start to feel normal again, whatever that might mean.
I mean, the complexities are just more than you can even contemplate sometimes when you're looking at, as you say, the operational elements they have to bring into play. Just picking up on the point there that you mentioned, where you've got a number of areas like Vegas, as you said, where you're based, there's a large part of international travel come into those regions. What does that mean? Those areas, there's a greater adjustment for them to look at the drive market, because traditionally that would have been a market that they would have looked at, but maybe made up a smaller percentage. I mean, I wouldn't know the data and the stats behind it. I guess you would have a much better insight because of the clients that you're working with. What's the insights on that side?
Yeah, I think it's so typically, Los Angeles is a big drive market feeder for Las Vegas. It's an easy drive, all of Southern California, but LA in particular. I think Los Angeles, you'll see reaching more north. I mean, you have a casino market in Reno, Northern Nevada, which typically services San Francisco. I imagine Vegas is going to try and steal share there.
Yeah,
but it's not, other than California, everything else is a pretty long haul. You have some feeder from Phoenix and Scottsdale. So I would anticipate what we're hearing is going to be a big shift in dollars to those areas. And then as the market, as flights open from Chicago, New York, Boston, Atlanta, kind of your big hub cities into Vegas. But yeah, in terms of, they're going to have to, international is a big play in Vegas, and they're going to have to find that business domestically in the short term.
Well, as you say, it's, I mean, I don't know drive times, but I mean, whether it could all be filled within the local drive, I guess it's all relative to how much and what constraints are put on in terms of opening as well. And back to the operational points that you mentioned previously, that if you can only open 40% of your rooms, and I guess it's not just a focus on the Vegas, but from a gaming point of view and from an F&B point of view, and just with the number of people you can have moving around, the actual gaming floor may be out of sync slightly with the capacity that you could be releasing in your hotel. So managing those elements falls within the sales, the revenue management, but then tying that in with the digital marketing and communications piece obviously has to be very well integrated.
Yeah, I think that, a couple of comments there. You think about cities like Las Vegas, Orlando, London, tier 1 convention cities. Vegas on a given day, midweek, if there's not a convention in town, is a ghost town. So figuring out how to replace that convention business is significant. It's not only the large convention center there, properties like Mandalay Bay have, more conventions meeting space than some large cities. I mean, you're talking about a single hotel in terms of, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of square feet of meeting space. So there's some significant challenges to replace. They can't replace all that business regionally. No, so that's why it'll be there'll be a very thoughtful cadence around how they reopen and at what percentages, only because they can't fill it, and from a health and safety standpoint. So
yeah, that makes sense. I think that picks up on something you were saying there in terms of, I mean, it's never been a one size fits all situation, but more than ever now. Just your point, it was interesting when you said about how you're even at a tactical level with your communication, how in the past showing your pool being busy and showing your restaurant being busy because that's a selling point of it being popular, and how you've now got to change all of your collateral to show that you're conscientious. I mean, this one size fits all never sat anyhow, but it's even more thrown out the window than it ever has been previously. How are
Yeah.
you seeing different? Are you seeing different responses from different brands, and whether it is the luxury market or upscale market? I mean, you tend to work in those sectors more than in the economy sector, don't you?
Yeah. We most of our clientele falls in 4 and 5 star space around the globe, and generally speaking, it's the same sentiment that I shared earlier. It's a slow open. They're trying to figure out how to position the a lot of these whether you're city center Vegas or a resort in Southeast Asia, a lot of your revenue is coming from ancillary parts of the business. Spa, food and beverage in particular has seen a massive increase in our business, in the hotel business in recent years. And in some cases, we have resort clients where half of their revenue or more comes from food and beverage related services.
Wow.
So, and that requires, busy, full restaurants and bars and nightclubs and all that sort of thing. And it's great, but it's different. We saw this past week in Seoul in South Korea, the clubs opened, they had an outbreak, and now they've reversed it. So
yep.
Hoteliers are trying, and owners are trying to avoid that. So trying to be thoughtful about how they open it. But, in terms of positioning, we're seeing a lot of restaurants and hoteliers that have restaurants think about really the focus on the food.
Mm-hmm.
So they've already shifted away that, in terms of imagery and positioning, it's about the food, not about the space. So, because the space is going to be different. You could very well walk into a restaurant with plexiglass between you, or,
Yeah, exactly.
We don't know what it's going to end up being, but it's going to be very different than, and I think it was in Amsterdam. I saw something this morning that has something around one of the, like these little glass greenhouses
I saw
along
that,
one of the river walks.
The greenhouses by the canal. Yeah, I thought that was quite a neat
Yeah.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, and then there's cost implications.
Yeah.
Having been on the hotelier side for a long time previously, thinking about the cost implications of how do you put this together. And if you're a branded hotel, the brand's going to mandate this. Or if you're franchised, if you own the asset, it's not as easy as saying the governor or the president or whomever said, open your hotel. It's just not that easy anymore. And then you have to go, once you decide how you're going to open it, you have to have the whole conversation about, all right, how do we price it, position it? And then as marketers, at the end of the day, how do we tell that story? And it's going to be different. And it is going to be different if you're on a beach and you have a lot of open space versus city center hotel in New York City, where you got 1 million people on the streets on any given day. Your positioning is you're going to be very thoughtful about it. So much more so than we had to previously.
Absolutely. And you make an interesting point there about your ownership structure, where the responsibility sits around if you're part of a brand. I guess also, and you mentioned there in terms of from a cost point of view, because at the moment, a lot of governments have put support in place for different industry sectors to support the staff. Well, if you're opening, but you can only bring back a certain level of staff, then you may, getting your cost base right and getting the messaging right to drive enough traffic into a constrained operation. And then those staff are coming back, they're no longer part of the support program. You've got to cover those costs. The complexities around it are quite numerous.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a challenge for all of us that have employees. And then if you're of any reach outside of your, for us being a US-based company, but offices around the globe and every major area other than South America, it's a challenge for us because we have to figure out, we want to make sure that we can bring back our employees at the right time, and we're careful about the cadence, and we're relying on hotels to provide their cadence around reopening, and they're trying to make accommodations based on how the local government's going to support or not support them based on reopening. And the cost piece is very interesting when you think about for us as travelers, hoteliers, and vendors that service the industry, and we ourselves, we travel, right? And we rely on these big major trade shows around the globe, like ITB and WTM and High Tech, and all these shows. What the requirements to put those together now have changed. We see that in our sales cloud side, the requests coming in to say, all right, how do I, we drive e-proposals for meeting planners into tens of thousands of hotels around the globe. And now they're like, all right, we have to have all these PPE requirements. And who's paying for that? Does the meeting planner, does the group pay for that? Is the hotel providing it because it's just the new normal?
Just expected.
But there's, you got a room for 1,000 people, and you've sold them a piece of business, and now all of a sudden you got to put 3 feet between them. Now you can only fit 600 in there. You literally have a physical space problem. Yeah. You can no longer service that group. So long story short, I think the cost implications impact all of us, not just the hotels, but people that are going to pay to have events in hotels, leisure travelers into hotels, us as vendors trying to support hotels.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of careful messaging that has to happen all the way around so that that people feel comfortable, because we can't have a false start.
The effect second time round could just be horrendous. I mean, it could be frightening.
Yeah. Hopefully we don't go there.
No, absolutely not. One of the things I did want to touch on, because of the variety of hotels that you're dealing with, the different groups, different locations, different types of properties, what are you seeing? I mean, we spoke with Dan, as I said, a couple of weeks ago, but a couple of weeks on, things change. Ideas evolve, operational strategies evolve. Can you give any sort of indication, without necessarily naming names, of course, but sort of what you're seeing of how hotels are looking at staggering their opening, and maybe how are they exploring tying in their messaging around that?
Yeah, so between the CRM platform and the RMS platform, all of our forward-looking data, we review it internally on a weekly basis. We've started to publish a little bit of that data now, that we're starting to see some consistency in it, because it was all over the place. Even 2 weeks ago, we've seen more consistency. To your point, things are changing so fast, but it still shows that most hoteliers are looking at a June 1 start, a few before, a few after. With that said, fairly low occupancy on the books until you get into late summer, and that's kind of across the globe. There's some pockets that have some higher occupancies, but you're looking at August, September before you get anything really meaningful. And I think, as hard as that is to swallow, in some ways, the slower opening is going to allow us to figure out the operational things we've talked about several times already today. So an owner doesn't want to hear that, obviously. They want to see ADR come back and occupancy come back as fast as possible from a revenue standpoint. But I think operationally, that might be a good thing.
Yeah. But it gives you a chance to manage
in terms of,
it?
Yeah, it does. And really fine tune so we can deliver
We've probably
that new normal experience.
Yeah, probably got greater chance of hitting that escalated occupancy levels later on if we manage it a little easier to start with.
Yep. Yeah, and we're seeing in terms of sort of digital media adoption and planning, following the exact same cadence. Most of our clients are now asking for revised media plan and strategy from a digital standpoint. Start in May. Here in May, it's a trickle in May, trying to build whatever base there might be, and then it just escalates up to basically a full return, provided we don't have another hiccup with this by fourth quarter, and then full speed into next year. So.
And are you seeing marked differences globally around the regions with the clients that you're dealing with, or are they all tending to follow a similar trend and pattern around that kind of June and then pushing through into that August, September period?
Yeah, for the most part, everyone's kind of following that. Again, there's, when you look at Hawaii, for example, it's so dependent on inbound from Asia, Seoul, Tokyo,
Hmm.
China to a certain extent. That's not coming back anytime soon. And
No.
there's very little outbound from the west coast of the U.S. to Hawaii. So I would anticipate Hawaii potentially could be a full quarter behind the
Right.
mainland U.S. So, you know, where you can't, where you have and you're in a situation where you're dependent on air, it's going to be a lot slower.
Yeah.
And if you're dependent on international air, as we talked about, so you know, just there's a little bit of variation there within the areas, but generally speaking, yeah, we're kind of hearing a June summer start slow, and build accordingly. And again, the occupancies we're hearing good group um, from the East Coast of the U.S.
Hmm.
Good group rebound starting in October. So large
Okay,
group
that's
business is
encouraging.
booked in October. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how they're going to pull it off
I was going to
operationally,
say,
but the good
yeah.
news is that meeting planners that large groups are coming back to some big group, sort of iconic locations on the U.S. So I assume those are domestic. I don't know that, but my guess is they would be domestic at this
Would
point.
seem
So
logical, wouldn't it? Yeah. Or very
yeah,
optimistic international companies.
yeah. I mean, kudos to them for being that optimistic. If that's the case.
Yeah, some maybe say naive, but we'll leave that one there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, I know you mentioned at the outset some of the technology that you guys are involved with, and when we spoke with Dan the other week, we got a chance to sort of focus in around the RMS piece and get his thoughts on that, and from a revenue forecasting point of view. Um, CRM has been discussed. I mean, from articles that we curate on the site, not necessarily daily, but weekly and certainly monthly, the emphasis was always there about the CRM. When we're talking about messaging, when we're talking about the different layers, when we're talking about the complexities of that message to different mix, depending on your different facilities and constraints, you would think having a piece of technology to help doing that would be fairly critical. Where would you lean towards, or what could you kind of talk to around that area?
It is critical. Two reasons, or two things. One, the first, we're seeing a lot of demand still for people that want to talk about CRM. They can't, not necessarily in a position to buy today,
Mm-hmm.
but they're doing their homework. We can see that through the engagement and our content around that, and the questions that the inbound that we're getting. We ironically, we've had probably last month, and then it looks like May will be record months in terms of content engagement around our platforms. CRM in particular is very strong for all the reasons you mentioned.
Yeah.
We have several groups, large chains around the globe that I won't mention, but that have used this time as an opportunity to accelerate their CRM implementations, really for two reasons. One, so they can understand their data better and sort of micro segment and build those personas out so they can really fine tune their targeting, because
Yeah.
everyone will spend digital marketing dollars.
Oh,
We
absolutely.
know that. But understanding who you're targeting and layering in your first party data, you have to have a good CRM platform in place to get that understanding. The second piece is the move towards a cookieless advertising environment in 2023.
Yeah.
Apple's already kind of removed that from their platform. Google's got plans to be here in the next few years, be done with that. And if you don't have a CRM platform in play today, you're going to need one, because your first party data is going to be you have to have it, or else
Yeah.
your ability to do your targeting and get in front of those people that you want is going to be extremely hard to do. So we see some proactivity around that from some pretty large groups around the world that we work with to get ready for that, which is forthcoming.
Can you just talk to that piece a little bit? I mean, I'm sure people have picked up on it, but maybe with everything that's going on, that what is changing, what Google is doing around the cookie piece.
Yeah, I mean, Apple's kind of put it in place already. You can completely opt out of it's a cookieless environment, so there's no tracking. It's all in the effort around privacy and
Mm-hmm.
controlling your data.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't have a one-to-one relationship, I will no longer be able to target you. That's the short answer. And by 2023, basically the entire digital ecosystem, browser-based ecosystem, app-based ecosystem will be cookieless. So our ability to track you as a random viewer to our website, a booking engine will be gone. So you'll have to engage either through an opt-in, a previous transaction, whatever it might be, where you've gotten that opportunity to communicate with that person, and that communication could be email, an advertisement, a piece of content, whatever it is, or historically you might have thrown something at someone just because you had them in a cookie pool. Those days will be gone. So the audience that was millions will now be thousands for a specific segment, and understanding that segment and that first party data will be imperative to driving successful returns with digital media. So lookalike audiences, using intent data, and all the things that you can collect now, you should be collecting and owning in a CRM platform, so you can leverage it moving forward. So it'll have from a consumer standpoint, it'll be great because you're only going to get things that are relevant to you and brands that you love and engage with, right? From a marketer standpoint, your quality on the advertising and how you engage with your customers, and the quality of your content, the threshold, it's already increasing, but it's going to become significantly a bigger challenge. So.
I mean, it does present, like all of these things, it presents an opportunity as well, doesn't it? Because if you
absolutely.
If you do get that data, and if you do get the message right, and if we are having to put the effort in to talk directly to our engaged consumers, then if we get the model and we get the framework well structured, then it could put us into a significant advantage going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that. We've seen it. We've kind of built our CRM and digital practice around that story, where if you take your first party data and you marry it into your digital media plan and you leverage that data appropriately, the return thresholds go up significantly. I mean, you can see a 10x return on your digital marketing. You layer in your first party data. We see consistently around the globe, clients move into the 33x in terms of return. So, but that takes that's not just us providing technology. That's the hoteliers embracing the technology and really wanting to leverage and build out those personas to drive those type of returns. So,
and I think that's the key thing. Yeah, I think that's the key thing, and it comes back to your first point about getting the data right and starting to take a more granular look at the data they already have. But it's also an opportunity to start to look at it, because just buying a piece of technology and plugging it in, okay, well, to be honest with you, any hotel can do that if they have the budget. Actually using it to its maximum and getting the best out of it requires a cultural shift to be collecting and understanding what data you want to capture and how to capture that data so that you can best use it from a messaging point of view at a later point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, thinking back to the previous question and then what you just said, there's a big opportunity. And obviously we hedged a bet when we bought Rainmaker in terms of personalized pricing. But our ability to deliver on that, well, we've got some features that we're working on now that are sort of on the pathway to personalized pricing. When you move to a cookieless environment and you've got all those people opted in and you're communicating with them and you understand their needs and the propensity to buy and the rate sensitivity and all those sort of things, and we can measure that on the RMS side and then marry that with the mechanism in which we can deliver pricing that's truly unique to you, whether it's packaged or just room, whatever it might be. I think it's really exciting, and it won't be just us that are moving towards it. I'm sure others are working towards that as well. But that's really exciting to me. And I think just sort of all the things that are happening now and forcing us into these conversations, and what folks like Apple and Google are doing, we're forcing our hand, will push us forward faster in terms of adoption and how we leverage that technology appropriately.
No, it makes sense. And if you get it right and combine those two things, then the potential conversion rate you should really start to see accelerate. From a summary, looking at the complexities that are around the digital marketing, that it isn't a one size fits all approach. There has got to be a degree of moving quickly, but at the same time in a measured and controlled way. And I think re-emphasizing the points that you've made through this about the correct targeting of the messages to the right markets, taking into account the shifting sands that are going on at a local, regional, national, international level,
Yep.
is more imperative now than it ever has been. So I think that's been highly valuable. Over to you if there's any final thoughts or comments that you'd like to make on that.
No, I think that you hit it on the head. I think, it's going to be slow and steady, and we have to be ready for when the change comes, as we're seeing almost on a daily basis. It comes quick. So we have to be ready to adapt to that accordingly. But I think it's a very tough time for our industry. But, if I'm half glass full, I'm really excited about how we're going to come out of this. I think it's going to force us to be a much more adaptive and responsive vertical,
Yep.
More in lines with like how retail and entertainment from a digital standpoint adopt and change so rapidly. I think we're going to see a rapid acceleration in digital coming out of this from a hotelier perspective. So
that's a good point.
With that said, I'm excited about what the future holds.
Brilliant. Well, it's great to have you with us. Really appreciate the time. I know, as you said at the beginning, it's busy times for you guys, which is great considering all that's going on. So carving out half an hour to be with us or so, we really appreciate that. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.